In this video, we're going to explain object auditing and the revision report utility. Automic Automation can track changes like object updates, deletions, and task changes. So every time a user does something, it's logged in the database. The feature is client-specific and it's disabled by default. If administrators want it, they have to enable it with a key in UC client settings. Generating the report is done in batch mode only and will provide the syntax. There's some important command options. We can use options to filter data to produce reports that are more focused. There are many filters, like the type of change that was made, the date, and more. Finally, object auditing has to be implemented alongside DB Archive, DB Reorg, and DB Unload, and so you must be comfortable with these utilities before you proceed. Object auditing generates massive amounts of data, and purging on a regular basis through maintenance procedures is critical to DB performance. As a rule, administrators have auditing and reporting obligations, and so we have to track user inputs and changes to the system. When objects are modified, imported, or deleted, we need a log of these events. This is called object auditing. By default, the feature is disabled. Administrators make the conscious decision to enable object auditing with the understanding that regular maintenance is needed to manage the data. Auditing is client-specific, and so we enable a key in UC client settings called object_audits. When you set the value to yes, changes to the system are logged. Most of the data is stored in a table called XAO. This is a table that expands very quickly and needs regular maintenance. The utility has an INI file, although it doesn't really contain anything that requires immediate attention. Settings include language and tracing, and so no specific configuration is required for the utility to work. The utility only has the batch mode. There is no user interface. We'll provide syntax for the command and describe its many options. So let's go ahead and look at the syntax. The utility file is ucbdbrr. Like most other utilities, some of the options are optional. -v prints the version of the AA system. -I points to the location of the INI file, and this is only needed if the file is not in the same location as the utility itself. Finally, -L sets the language. Let's look at the required options. -B is a constant for batch modes. -C points to the client number. -O sets the name and location of the report output file. You should use this option and make sure the reports are stored in a managed location with regular backups. The default location is set to the utility bin directory, which is really something we should avoid. The default name is the utility followed by output.txt. -F deserves a closer inspection. Logging produces massive amounts of data, which isn't always easy to navigate. -F lets you segregate your reports by action type. You can use -F delete to output only deletions, or obj_mod for object modifications. We definitely recommend using this option to track the actions you need and disregard the others. -D1 and D2 sets date filters so you can focus on specific historical records. D1 is the start date of your report. D2 is the end. It has a simple date and time mask, which we're showing here. The basic premise of -A is to tell the system to flag records for archive as they are output to the revision reports. You're basically telling the system, it's okay, I've got the records in the report. They can be archived when DB Archive runs. Once you run DB Reorg and DB Unload, those records are removed. In this respect, you need a high degree of competency with archiving, reorganizing, and unloading before you enable object auditing. You might lose valuable data or cause the XAO table to expand in an uncontrolled manner. We're going to spend a lot more time with the -A option. The -X option is a filtering device. It tells the system that you're not interested in outputting records that have already been flagged for archive. This means that -A and -X can be used together to streamline the process of flagging for archive and output only the new records. We'll spend more time on -X as well. Let's provide some examples. This command shows basic use. You generate a report for client 100 with the output of the location. This command generates a report for client 200, which includes only records that were deleted, modified, or created. This report includes all change types, but for records generated between January 1st and January 2nd of 2021. This report is generated for client 200 and includes only the deleted records. Once the report is generated, the records receive the archive flag. When DB Archive or Reorg executes, these records are flagged for removal. DB Unload deletes the records. This generates the same report, however, anything that has been flagged for archive with the -A option is not included. The DB Reorg targets object audit records. It's reflected in the DB Reorg UI and UC utility reorg client variable. You should always enable object audit reorg even if you don't use object auditing. It won't hurt, and if it does get enabled in the future, you'll be glad those records were cleaned out. The reorg flags these records for removal based on a number of days. An OA reorg set to 10 days flags all OA records older than 10 days. This is a sound approach to administration of the database. Please take note of something very important. Reorg settings include one important true-false switch called Only Reorg Revised Object Audits. If you enable it, the system reorg object audit records, but only if they've been output to a revision report. You're foregoing the reorg process for the sake of preserving records never captured in a report. We must warn administrators against this feature, unless you know what you're doing. If this isn't properly configured, you could experience severe problems with the database. For this reason, you should schedule the revision report on a regular basis and match it with proper archiving, reorganizing, and unloading. Note that the -A option takes precedence over this switch. Let's explain what option -A does. With or without the -A option, the output is the same, it's the report. But the -A option flags those specific records for archiving. When you run DB Archive or DB Reorg, you're marking them for removal. Without -A, those records will still be handled by DB Archive and DB Reorg unless you've enabled the Only Reorg Revised Objects audit switch. This table further explains this. As long as the switch is not enabled, OA records are reorganized no matter what. This is also true if you run the report with the -A option. However, in the event the switch is enabled and you do not use the -A option, then your XOA table is effectively not maintained, which is very serious. The -X option selects records that aren't flagged with the archive flag. Let's imagine the following scenario. On date D, we output a report with a -A option. Those records are flagged. Over the following 5 days, more object audit records accumulate. Assuming we haven't reorged and unloaded, a standard revision report produces the initial pre-date D datasets plus the new datasets. The -X option will produce a report that only contains the records post-date D. Finally, we offer some recommendations. With object auditing enabled, your XOA table needs to be maintained. We recommend encapsulating the revision report utility in a job and then automating it alongside your scheduled maintenance procedures that include archiving, reorganizing, and unloading. We have discussed this at length. Enable the Only Reorg Revised Object Audit switch if you have a solid grasp of maintenance procedures and you're intent on preserving the records that you didn't output. When you're getting started and you're unsure on how to proceed, set this to false and UC utility reorg. You can combine the use of -A and -X in the same automated procedure. You output the records that haven't been flagged, but flag them in the same continuous process. At the next instance of the task, you'll only include records that were generated from the onset of the previous task. The revision report is optional and many customers don't use it. If you need it, make sure to include client 0. Finally, make sure you store those reports in a location that is accessible with backup capabilities like a shared drive. Using the default bin directory as the storage location for your reports could lead to major problems for obvious reasons.